Hey everyone, this is Hayden here with Tanaya in sunny Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm here, pull, just waiting for Chris Winter to join us here. Hey Chris,
Hey Hayden, how's it going?
good, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We got some snow last night down here, so it's feeling like winter again.
That sounds good. We got a little bit of snow up here, but skiing's pretty bony still, so we could use another couple dumps.
Yeah, that's too bad, but hopefully things will kick in soon enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're based in Boulder, Colorado, right?
Yeah. Access Funds headquarters are based here in Boulder. So I live up in the hills and northwest of town a little bit. So it's nice. I'm up in the mountains, got a little bit of space, which is nice. So yeah, it's kind of close to Rocky Mountain National Park. Really good climate access, of course. So it's a pretty nice spot.
Nice, yeah. And are you an ice climber as well?
I used to do a bunch of ice climbing. I haven't done so much in the last few years, but actually, I've just been shopping around for a new pair of tools, and I'm kind of stoked to get back out there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, well, let's wait for a few more people to join us here. And yeah, I guess, I mean, you said the winter skiing hasn't been great. What's your main flavor of climbing? Are you mostly a sport climber, trad climber?
I'm into all of it really. When I got into climbing, it was more through mountaineering and alpinism, and got into alpine rock pretty early. And so, mostly a rock climber. Love sport climbing, trad climbing, spending time in the mountains. So, kind of an all arounder. But here in Boulder, there's a lot of really good sport climbing, and the trad climbing is really good, especially in the summer. So,
Yeah,
a lot of variety. And the fall was fantastic here. I mean, pretty dry conditions, good temps. So we had a really good climbing season here in the fall, despite the pandemic and all that other craziness.
awesome. Yeah, well, it's a good place to be, I guess. Get easy access to the outdoors.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's we're lucky here for sure.
yeah. Yeah, so for everyone who's just joining us here, I'm sitting down with Chris Winter, who's the executive director of the Access Fund. And if you don't know what the Access Fund is, we have an international audience here. It is the climbing advocacy group here in the U.S., helping protect all of our climbing areas. And there's an educational aspect to it. They also buy climbing properties that are at threat, trail work, rebolting, you name it. They just keep our playgrounds safe. So yeah, we're excited to have you on here and talk about responsible climbing, and especially in light of the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the invite. I really appreciate it. 2020 has been a weird year, but I think one of the things that we have learned as a result of this whole experience is how much we value our outdoor spaces and the opportunity to spend time outside, and how important climate is to all of us. And I think we really saw that in a way we didn't expect once we were able to get back outside after the pandemic loosened up a little bit. Just a mad rush of people out to the crags all over the country. And so at the Access Fund, that really made us step back and think hard about how important our work is. So it's been a really interesting year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for those in different countries or who are not initiated with the Access Fund, can you give us a brief overview of what you guys do and what your role is there?
Yeah, so Access Fund, our mission here is to keep climbing areas open and conserve the climbing environment. And so it's both an access, a conservation, and also a stewardship focus. The organization's almost 30 years old. We were founded in 1991. And we have 6 kind of core program areas that we focus on. We do a lot of climbing policy work. So, we represent more than 7 million climbers across the country in all forms of climbing in the halls of Washington, D.C. on a variety of policies, from protecting large landscapes that climbers enjoy to individual climbing management decisions at climbing areas, crags, and boulder fields all across the country. So we spend hundreds of hours in D.C. every year, which is really fun work. We have a stewardship program. So we employ 3 professional trail crews that drive around the country 10 months a year and dig into hardcore stewardship trail building projects. And they are really, really hardworking folks, and they do super high-end work out in the field. So it's really cool to see what kind of work they can get done.
Yeah, I've seen some of the blog posts that just went out with the before and after photos of some of the erosion prevention there. It's pretty impressive work.
Yeah, I mean, it's so cool to see what they get done on the ground. It's amazing. And then we're a nationally accredited land trust. So it's pretty cool story. We're the only nationally accredited land trust in the country that's working for climbers and human-powered outdoor rec. And so we actually manage, about $1.5 million in a revolving loan fund. And we can just loan that money out to local climbing organizations, buy up crags that are on private property that are threatened. And so that's a really unique tool that we bring to the table. And then we also work on climber education and working with private landowners as well. And then finally, we support, a network of over 130 local climbing organizations around the country. They're formal affiliates with the Access Fund, and they're working on specific crags or in regions. And we just give them all the tools and resources they need to be successful in the local communities.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so you're doing a bunch of everything there. You kind of have the field side, you're out there at the crags themselves, and then the policy side, the politics, the land side, so education point to it.
Yeah, it's a really neat organization, and we're able to, take any particular threat to access or conservation issue and figure out which one of those tools is the best one to fix the problem. And so like Lover's Leap, California is having a real severe impacts from overuse. So we send our conservation teams in there and work on building some sustainable blade platforms and trails, and that's really effective. In a place like Bears Ears, where it was a monumental battle over the future of public lands, that's a place where our policy program really was the right tool, and we dug in hard to get that place, to help get that place protected as a national monument, and then to defend that monument designation over time. And so, it's a different tool for different place.
Yeah. What are some of the campaigns you have ongoing right now?
So there's a lot of good things happening right now for climbing. I mean, our stewardship program is firing on all cylinders. And so we have been doing some really good work at the Bridge Buttress in the New River Gorge. We did some work this summer, like I said, at Lover's Leap. We've got a multi-year campaign going down at Indian Creek to build sustainable trails to a lot of the popular walls. And we've been working in the Northeast in places like Rumney and Cathedral Ledge. And so with the explosion in the popularity of climbing, it's really important that climbers kind of step up and take care of our own impacts. And so our stewardship program is handling these big long-term projects all over the country, which is super exciting. On the policy side, we're working to really protect climbing access and working to kind of build in consistency for how federal land managers manage climbing across the country. And so, at this point, we've done a really good job of protecting climbing access on a site-specific basis at places around the country. And now we're trying to get some national level guidelines put in place and get that to be consistent from agency to agency and all across the country. So we're working hard in DC to get that done. And then, we're looking at a modern day civilian conservation corps proposal as a way to help us both protect public lands and as a tool for economic recovery coming out of the pandemic. And so we're in DC working with our congressional partners, trying to get a $9 billion CCC program through Congress next year. So
Yeah. So I guess how can people be a part of the Access Fund? Like, what can an individual do here?
Yeah, so I mean, the best thing to do is to just sign up on our email list at accessfund.org and make sure that folks are plugged in and getting all of our communication outreach materials. We do a pretty good job of getting people educated on what's happening and how they can plug in and be advocates. So that's the best thing, to just sign up on our email listserv at accessfund.org. Also become a member, give a little bit of money. We can also support your local climbing organization for a joint membership program that we run. And so, we are powered by climbers for climbers. And it's because tens of thousands of climbers all across the country chip in a little bit of money here and there that we're able to get the work done and spend time in DC and send our trail crews all over the country. So the most important thing is for climbers just to get involved, stay informed, give a little bit of money, become members. And then, the next thing folks can do is just get out at your crag, plug in with your LCO, do a little bit of volunteer work, taking care of those special places. It feels great. It's a great way to meet some folks and to give back to those places that we enjoy spending so much time at.
Yeah. And do you have to be here in the U.S. to be a part of this? Or can you, if you're an international climber and say, after the pandemic, you want to do a big road trip in the U.S. Is it worth becoming a member, or can you become a member?
Totally, yeah. I mean, we're definitely set up to take support from folks around the world. We really love hearing from people in other countries. We actually just had a international workshop of climbing advocates that we pulled together. I think we had 600 people from all over the country register for this virtual workshop on how to be climbing advocates and protect these places. So we love hearing from people in other parts of the world, and we're doing what we can to help support that work in places too.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, let's kind of dive into some climbing here. So, I mean, obviously, gyms are shut down in a lot of places, or they're
Yeah.
restricted, or they have a lot of limitations. And people, I've seen, at least around Santa Fe as well, this big wave of new climbers coming outside. So, I mean, what are you and the field teams kind of seeing out there in terms of impact?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it. Our program director, our stewardship director, Ty Tyler, lives in his van and travels the country all year, planning these stewardship projects. And he's reported back a few times that he is seeing it. I think all of us who spend a lot of time at the crag are seeing it as well. So we have to change the way that we think as climbers. And if you kind of think back to when Access Fund got started 30 years ago, the big fight back then is climbing even allowed out on public lands and on private lands? We were just fighting for the right to access these places. And we've been wildly successful in that work for the last 30 years. I mean, now we don't have to go to land managers and be like, yeah, we're climbers and, here's what we do. Land managers know about us. We're part of the process. We're part of the system. And land managers, know that that's a legitimate use. But now what we got to deal with is the impacts of our own overuse of these places. And we got to try to get in front of that curve, because if we don't, then the new generation of access restrictions are going to come down the pipe at us, and it's going to be about limiting overuse and the impacts of the climbing community, as opposed to trying to legitimize our use in the first place. So really hard about that, and I think the first thing that we got to do as climbers is to step up, be responsible when we go out to the crag, treat those places with respect, and I think it's super important for climbers to have an organization that goes to land managers, will build the trails, will take care of the belay platforms, will educate our community, and will be your partner. Because the agencies aren't going to do that kind of work for us. They don't have the resources. So that's where we come in.
Okay. Yeah, and have you seen any issues lately with overcrowding? I know parking's a huge issue, and in the beginning of the pandemic, there's that photo of Bishop, and the cars were just lined up as far as you can see. I mean, has that been a threat to access currently, and have any areas even had to shut down?
It's definitely a threat to access. I mean, the one that people have been following most recently is in Red Rock, outside Vegas. And, BLM and the land manager down there has put in place a timed entry system, which is basically a way to limit the number of cars that go through the gate onto the loop road. And that kind of was a surprise when it was announced. And it's a direct response to the overcrowding issues, and it's a limitation on access. So that's a really pertinent example of how the explosion in the number of climbers can result in limitations in access. And our position isn't that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I just think it's super important for the land managers to be clear with the climbing community in advance that they're going down this road and they're thinking about how to manage crowding. And I think the land managers need to be clear with what kind of conditions they're trying to create, what kind of data they have, and make sure that we're making well-informed decisions and not just reacting to what we think is the problem. So, in that particular situation, we wish it would have been better planned out and that there would have been more up front and a little bit of a bigger picture perspective on how to manage recreation, not just on the loop road, but in other places that are impacted by climbers in that same area. And so we're still working towards that goal. But in general, that's a good example of how the explosion in the number of climbers is definitely going to create access issues for us in the future if we're not really careful.
Yeah. Do you think the pandemic could almost be, blessing in disguise here, where we have to consider our numbers? We can't have people, shoulder to shoulder packed in at the boulders and crags. So do you think it might be worth implementing a reservation system like Waco at some of these areas to kind of keep a number or a cap there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a super site-specific thing. So the pandemic is definitely a silver lining to the pandemic. And one of the silver linings is that people are appreciating access even more now. And people are turning to the outdoors and just getting everything that everybody benefits out of spending time outside is becoming way more important for folks right now. That's a great thing. Being outside is so good for people, and we want to encourage that. And I think it's also an opportunity for all of us to reflect on how important it is for us to step up and take responsibility to take care of all those places that we go and appreciate, and that we have inherited as a legacy from the people that have come before us. Like, it's up to us to take care of these places, and it's more important now than ever. So those are some of the silver linings of the pandemic. And I think it is going to be an opportunity moving forward for us to talk about what we need to do as outdoor rec becomes more popular and there's more competing demands for public spaces, what we need to do to share and to take care of these places so we don't ruin them for the next generation of climbers.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, what are some of the issues we're seeing out now? I know like trash is a problem, human waste has been a problem, along with parking. I mean, do you think this is mostly coming from climbers, or is it mostly other recreationalists who are using these multi-use areas, and climbers kind of taking some of the blame for it?
It's not just climbers, and it's not just new climbers. Okay, I mean, even the growth in climbers, it's not just a new climber issue. It's all climbers that are out there. We all have an equal responsibility to take care of these places. It's not just about all the new climbers. Also not just about climbers. I mean, we've seen an explosion in growth from hikers and campers and fishermen and people who are hunting and just spending time outside. So like at Smith Rock in Oregon, where I lived for a long time, I mean, the population and the visitation has gone through the roof at Smith Rock, not just this year, but in the recent years. And that's partially because of climbers, but it's also an incredibly popular hiking destination. And so as the climbing community, we got to realize we're dealing with increased competition from other outdoor recreational users and from extractive industry. And so in order to have a seat at the table, we got to be really good stewards and take care of our own impacts first. And then we got to engage with all the other user groups, and we got to build partnerships. And then we got to advocate for what we want. But the picture's becoming a lot more complex than it used to be.
And do you think some of the bad behaviors out there, is it because people are just selfish or lazy, or is it more of out of a lack of education? They haven't spent much time outdoors, and they don't realize you can't just leave your toilet paper in the bush there.
I mean, it's a combination of things. I think, frankly, like for climbing, the impacts that we see from the climbing community at the crags, a lot of it is overuse, so trail erosion, parking problems. There's human waste issues for sure. And so a lot of those issues result from the fact that there was no upfront planning of recreational infrastructure. Climbers went in, developed a bunch of routes. It's a really cool spot, but they didn't think about, like thousands of people using that place every year. And so really it's just to nobody's fault. It's just we didn't plan these places out expecting this level of crowding. So now we have to think about planning recreational infrastructure. That means laying out the trails in a way that's sustainable, armoring the base areas, trying to keep people confined, walking all over the place, thinking about parking and where people are going to park their cars. And so a lot of it is just for popular crags, infrastructure planning in a way that's a little bit more systemic and holistic than just, what happens when somebody finds a crag, develop it. So that, along with educating the climbing community on what we all need to do to protect these places, I think are the biggest challenges.
Yep. Yeah, so it's more that there's too many people out there, and these are sensitive environments in a lot of places, especially the desert, and a lot of erosion and social trails coming in. So,
but I mean, in the climbing community, especially, like there's very little just outright bad behavior.
Yeah.
I don't see that a lot. And I talk to a lot of folks when I'm out climbing. I don't see a lot of people being like, I don't care. I'm just going to, cut down a tree, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, just because it's fun, or I'm going to shoot off a bunch of fireworks or whatever. I don't see very much bad behavior in the climbing community at all. Usually it's just people don't realize that their individual behavior, if repeated by everybody, adds up to a really bad impact. And then if you just are nice to folks and talk through it with them and, help them realize that if everybody threw their banana peel on the ground at a climbing crag, pretty soon there'd be 1,000 banana peels, and it takes them a year to degrade and the place to be a trash heap. So if you talk through those things with people and, treat them with respect, and you're nice out of the crag, and you do a little education, most people in the climbing community are pretty darn responsive to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. You mentioned, like, how can somebody respectfully approach somebody else when they see them throwing their banana peel or doing something they shouldn't be doing? And like, because obviously we want to be accepting to everybody at the crag and newer climbers, but you also want to confront some of these behaviors and take these areas. So how do you find that balance of being polite and but also educating at the same time?
I think a big part of it is just being nice, and being nice to the crag before something comes up. And so I kind of, like, as soon as I step out of the car at the crag, I'm just try to be aware of who's around me, what's happening, be a little outgoing, just say hi to folks, and interact with them a little bit when you're out there. Just talk about, whatever, strike up small talk conversation. And then, if you have a little bit of rapport with somebody, when something like that comes up, it's a lot easier to just be like, hey, by the way, don't leave your banana peel around or whatever. So offering a little bit of beta, talking about the weather, asking them where they're from, whatever you can do to just be nice and establish a little bit of an exchange early in the day, I think goes along with the them up. So I've found that to be helpful.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
And what about music at the crags? We see that a lot around here. People blasting music, mostly see a lot in the bouldering areas.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people come out and they want to have that gym environment, or they're hanging out with their buddies, they're having a good time, and they're not quite aware of everybody else around them and how they might appreciate that or be affected by that.
Yeah. I mean, the music thing is tough. That's a hard one. And, sometimes I'll just go somewhere else. Once in a while, if I really I can't go somewhere else, then, maybe I'll say something. But, another big part of this that I've learned, especially during the pandemic, is like having a backup plan for your day. Plan A, plan B, plan C, so that if, it's too crowded at one spot or the conditions aren't right or whatever, you got a backup plan. You can just, change course and go somewhere else. I think that's important.
Yeah, I have a few projects instead of just one. So there's a line in front of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So going back,
overcrowding issues in New Mexico? I mean, I know places like Roy have become pretty popular, but what else are you seeing out there?
I mean, for the most part, northern New Mexico is pretty quiet. It's nice. I was at El Rito the other weekend, and it was a beautiful day, wintry day, and climbing in a t-shirt though, and there's 2 or 3 other groups there. It's a large area. So for the most part, New Mexico is really lucky. We don't see these huge crowds. Roy is another problem where and it's a unique scenario where we have this world-class bouldering destination that stayed hidden for so long and nobody knew about it. So all of a sudden, when the guidebook came out, it blew up everywhere. Everyone from the Front Range of Colorado is driving down, and it's national grasslands out there. So there's one little campground, but it can't really handle people. There are no toilets, pit toilets. There's no parking. The vans just kind of spread out in the radius there. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen there in the next few years.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. And it's important for us to kind of get on top of that stuff. It's an educational mission first, right? So we all got to, in the climbing community, talk to each other about what we got to do to minimize our impacts when we're out there. Because if we don't do it, the land managers, at some point will probably step in and do it for us. And that's what we don't want. So and get in front of it. And that's the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how do you guys decide what projects to take on? Because obviously we have so many climbing areas across the whole country here, and other areas in the world as well. But how do you kind of allocate your resources and say, we're going to work in this area this season, to what extent as well? Yeah,
so it's kind of a mix of things. So our folks on the program side that are doing stewardship work and buying climbing areas and working on public lands, they're all very experienced, and so they kind of know where the priority areas are. And so we develop, a strategy based on what we see as the needs are across the country in terms of the biggest impact for climbers, those places that can set a precedent, that might impact how other situations play out in the future. And so we kind of try to have a strategic approach to where we engage, looking at those kinds of issues. But then we're also really responsive. So people all over the country will bring us issues, access issues, stewardship issues, And we like to say that no landscape is too large and no crag is too small for us to work hard to protect that place. And so we also try to be super responsive to the community when folks are like, hey, I've got this little boulder field in my backyard somewhere in North Carolina or something, and I really want to try to protect access. We're happy to plug into that effort as well if we have enough time. And so it's a combination of being strategic with our national perspective and being responsive to what the community wants to see and brings us.
Okay. Do you just have a massive tick list of here's everything you want to do and you kind of prioritize it?
It's insane. I mean, we worked on, I think, 215 crags last year.
Wow.
During the pandemic. We worked on 215 crags. I mean, we helped the Gunks Climbers Coalition buy an amazing spot in the Gunks. We closed on a transaction outside Leavenworth, Washington. We're working with the incoming administration, hoping to advocate for a restoration of the national monument boundaries of Bears Ears. We're advocating for national climbing guidelines. So it's an amazing portfolio of work. It's crazy how much work is on our plate. We got a staff of like 28 or 30 folks, and so it's crazy. It's a lot to juggle, and I'm really thankful the staff is so skilled at what they do. So there's an immense amount of work that needs to get done. So we're doing our best.
Yeah. Are you seeing an increase in membership as the climbing community grows?
For sure, and that's something we're really excited about. I think we've got about 23,000 members all across the country, who have given to the Access Fund in the last 12 to 15 months, and it's amazing. We so appreciate that support, and it's critical. And I think people, give because when they start to go climbing outside, they realize that these things just don't happen. Like, we have to, as climbers, step up and steer the ship and kind of create what we want to see. And if we really value our public lands, we got to be the ones to step up and protect them and make sure that we have the opportunity to enjoy them. So it's pretty cool to see so many climbers around the country step up and play with us.
Yeah, I mean, route development's not cheap. Putting in nice stainless steel hardware and anchors, it costs a lot.
I know. We're giving away, about $15,000 a year for anchor replacement efforts all around the country. We're giving away about $60,000 a year in conservation grants to local climbing organizations to build trails, to take care of human waste issues, economic research, starting LCOs, all kinds of things. So the money that people give us gets used really well. We're super efficient, and we try to make sure that we're having a big impact when people trust us with their money.
Yeah. Yeah. So with like the anchor replacement, you allocate that to local climbing organizations or individuals who have a project that they pitch to you guys?
Yeah, so anchor replacement's a huge issue, and so we give money out to the local climbing organizations who need hardware and expenses to do the work. A lot of it's volunteer led, but they need help with covering the costs, and so that's where we come in. We also, have these bolt removal devices that we share with local climbing organizations to use, and then we also help share out resources and information. We've had fixed anchor workshops in the past, bring people together from all over the country to share out best practices and information on best kinds of hardware. So, we're trying to get people network, share out information and skills, share out some money, some tools. And help facilitate, what is really a volunteer-led effort all over the country.
Mm-hmm. And have you been able to stay active throughout the pandemic? Like, have you had to cut trail days with groups, or everything's outside? Has it been pretty much the same?
We have been very lucky, and that's mostly because the community has continued to support Access Fund really strongly throughout the whole pandemic. Which we're really thankful for. So we have not had to lay off anybody. We didn't have to furlough anybody or cut back on any staff time at all the entire time. We had 3 teams that were doing conservation work in the field in the middle of March when this whole thing started. 2 of those teams were in Indian Creek, and BLM worked with us to keep them actively working on really cool trail projects, and we just scaled back their volunteer interactions. There was a team in Moss Rock, Alabama, and the lane manager out there was also amazing, and had them stayed at a state park where they were working. And again, they just kept working straight through, and we just scaled back their volunteer interactions. So we were really happy that they kept doing great work, and they got some great work done, and we slowly started to add the volunteer pieces back in later in the summer. So overall,
Yeah,
it's good.
that's good to hear. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess like what as individuals can we do? Like if you're going out climbing every weekend, what's a good place to start where we can be a little bit more responsible and take initiative here?
So, a couple things. One is to, like I said before, just have a couple few plans when you go out. Right now with COVID especially, it's important to try to stay spaced out. Everybody kind of has their own risk tolerance level and own views on, the pandemic and risk. But I think it's really important to just be nice to everybody when you're out there, communicate, talk to folks, and be willing to adjust and just, be sympathetic that everybody has a different approach to how to get through this pandemic. So I think that's the most important thing we can all do, right, especially when we're out climbing, is to just be nice to each other, because it's been a pretty tough year. And we're all kind of frayed around the edges. And, a little bit of kindness goes a long way, especially because we all love climbing so much. So that's a really easy thing, and I think makes everybody's day way more enjoyable. Pick up trash when you're out there. I think our crags need a lot of love right now, so take an extra trash bag with you. Be prepared to help pick up a little bit and leave the place a little bit better than you found it. And then plug in with your local climbing organization. There's 130 plus of them all over the country. Find out which one's active in your community, and try to volunteer when there's some trail days. Give a little bit of money. Reach out to the folks who are running those organizations and give them a big shout out and a high five and let them appreciate what they're doing, and just stay up to date. So I think those are really easy things for folks to do right now.
Yeah, it doesn't really change your climbing lifestyle either. So
it doesn't change your climbing lifestyle. It actually makes it better.
yeah,
Come back and it's like you feel more connected to that place, which is a really cool thing. I mean, I think that connection that we feel with these special places, that just goes a long way towards making our lives way more interesting and fulfilling, and us happier people. And you'll be more connected to the people around you too. So we get a lot out of that.
yeah. Yeah, and you take a little bit of the ownership in the area, a crag that you go to every weekend and you help out a little bit. You feel kind of that personal connection versus, that's just an area I go and use.
Yeah. And, and it goes a long way. I mean, when land managers see climbers taking care of the place just because they care about it so much, that goes a long way toward protecting access. And it helps the land managers make the case for getting resources from the government to manage and improve those places. And so that partnership and just us setting it a good example is really super important and has a big impact on the future of these places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially at multi-use areas too, where, climbers are the ones, making the good example out there, and then the hikers and bikers and everyone else running out there, they see that example and follow along.
Yeah, and I just want to give a big shout out to the climbing community. We're doing a pretty darn good job, and I think we're looked at as one of the more responsible user groups. Kind of, sometimes focus in on like disputes or high profile issues that pop up, but in the big picture, the land managers really enjoy working with us. And, I had somebody report back that they were in a meeting with BLM recently, and the BLM folks were like, hey, the climbers are doing a great job. We really enjoy working with them, and they're one of the standout user groups. So we're doing well, and I don't think the climbing community hears that enough. And it's important because the managers recognize it, and they like working with us, and that puts us in a pretty important position.
Has that changed over the years? I mean, has reaching out to landowners, maybe 20 years ago in the beginning of the Access Fund, was that more difficult when they didn't really understand what climbing was versus now where they see a lot more climbers and they see how we are good stewards to the land? So is it easier to negotiate nowadays?
It's way easier, and it's changed a lot. So, there's so many parts to that, but like, for instance, we have at the Access Fund formal memorandums of understanding with the three primary land managers of the federal government, the Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, and Forest Service. And so we have a formal relationship, and that allows climbers a seat at the table in how these decisions are made on an ongoing systemic basis. So that's huge. But then the other side of that is if we have our trail teams, and so we go to the land managers and say, hey, this area is starting to get hammered. We're going to fix it. We've got the teams. We'll raise the money. We'll go in there and do the work. All you need to do is give us the authorization to do it, and we're going to do your job for you. And we've been doing that now for 10, 12 years all over the country, and the agencies know it. And so that just establishes a certain level of credibility. and trust that you can't do any other way. And so we now have that because we've been doing it for so long, and you can't just replicate that out of thin air. So things have gotten a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you think as climbing grows, as an industry, do we have a louder voice or seat at the table, and when it comes to politics, too?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, that has changed a ton in the last 5 years. So like when we go to climb the hill with the American Alpine Club and go lobby it in Washington, D.C., and we've got, Alex and Tommy and Sasha and all these pro athletes with us, and we sit down at a table across from a senator or a congressperson, and we say, we want to protect public lands because we love them, and here's some cool photos. And by the way, this also is amazing for rural economies. That's like the actual face to this intersection between economic development and conservation and stewardship and outdoor recreation. And that we just have huge traction on that in Washington, D.C. right now. And we're punching way above our weight on policy issues because that intersection of outdoor rec and rural economic development is so popular in a bipartisan way in Washington, D.C. in a way that almost no other issues are, especially in such a divisive political environment. So the last 2 years, we've had some major landmark victories in D.C., things like the Great American Outdoors Act, where we secured $2.8 billion per year in funding for public lands this year. And then in 2019, the Dingle Act, we got 2.3 million acres of protected land designated through Congress. And for the first time ever, protections for wilderness climbing written into law. Those are two huge landmark legislative victories that were really unpredictable in such a divisive time. So climbers doing great things.
Yeah. How do you work with other user groups out there? I know like there's that off-road ATV crowd that's in a lot of these areas in the desert as well, and sometimes they butt head with climbers and out there, but also, we kind of have the same goals. We're out here to enjoy these areas. Like, is there, any way we can bring those groups in and really work together?
Yeah, there's a variety of coalitions that are active in Washington, D.C. that are helping different user groups in the outdoor rec space come together and advocate. And so, for instance, Access Fund is part of a coalition called Outdoor Alliance. And so that's a coalition of human-powered outdoor recreation groups that come together and advocate collectively on policy issues. But we also partner up with groups like the Outdoor Industry Association, which represents the outdoor industry more broadly on policy issues. And then there's groups like the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which is a coalition of industry groups across the outdoor space, which includes RV users, off-roaders, hunters, anglers, all kinds of folks. And so we're working in coalitions with all these user groups when our interests are aligned. And right now, protecting public lands and promoting outdoor rec and economic development is something that a lot of different people are interested in. So we're getting a lot of traction on those issues.
Cool. Yeah. The Access Fund as an organization, is it pretty unique to the United States, or are there similar organizations in a lot of other countries?
So Access Fund is pretty unique because, for one thing, it's a national organization for climbers that's dedicated solely to access, conservation, and stewardship. And so in a lot of other countries, it's kind of like the International Climbing Federation for that country will have a small part that's dedicated to these access and stewardship issues. And so those issues, in my mind, don't get enough attention unless they're set aside in a separate organization that's solely dedicated to those issues. And so that's really the power of Access Fund, is that 30 years ago, our founders had the vision and the forward-looking commitment to actually take all those important functions and set them aside into a separate organization dedicated solely to that. That was huge. And, Armando Menical and Rick Akamoz, some of these folks from back in the day deserve a ton of credit for that vision. And so that's unique here in the United States. And so in other places, we see like regional or local conservation organizations, but not with the same national level organization and history that we have here. So we're trying to share that out to other folks as a model we can.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, I guess, let's see. What do you think the future of climbing is going to look like in the United States and more globally? Are we just going to see a continued expansion of this and more issues, and how can we kind of future-proof these crags and climbing?
Yeah, I'm curious what you think. Are you seeing the growth in climbing still pretty tangible where you live? Because here in Colorado, it definitely feels like the sport's still growing quickly, but people come at that angles. Is it you still feel like it's growing where you are?
I do, yeah, and especially with the gyms. We have a new gym that just opened in Albuquerque this year. There's two Stone Ages down there, one here in Santa Fe. So I think that's kind of the entry point most people have these days, coming up through the gyms. But for the most part, a lot of those people want to venture outside eventually. So it might take months or years, but kind of expands, and people have more and more interest outside.
I agree. I think it's going to keep growing. I think the gyms are going to be a big part of that. And I think the gyms also are hopefully going to be a big part of helping to educate the climbing community to be good stewards and responsible climbers. I mehave the Olympics is coming up next year. Just got locked in for 2024, I think, again. And with the free solo and the dawn wall, climbers have a lot of a big opportunity, a huge stage right now, and I think the sport's going to continue to grow. So the crowds are going to continue to grow. The crags are going to face more challenges. Lane managers are going to have to make difficult decisions as there's more and more people out there. So for climbers, we have to be more strategic, more organized, and more diligent just in taking care of our own impacts and maintaining a sustained presence with all the land managers so that, the next wave of access threat, which is closures from overuse, don't catch us by surprise. And I think we can avoid that if we're really strategic and intentional about it.
Yep. And I think that's a challenge too for climbers, because a lot of climbing culture, we were kind of like, the rogue loners. We weren't doing team sports. We were out there alone in these areas, but that's not really the case anymore. It's gone mainstream. So the way to make it sustainable isn't everybody doing what they want to do. We kind of have to become more responsible and organized now.
Yeah, I think we kind of have to. That backcountry rogue experience is still out there. Nobody wants to change that, right? So, nobody wants to go into some of these remote alpine places or into the middle of the desert and be like, oh yeah, let's build a bunch of trails or a bunch of belay platforms or a bunch of toilets in these places that people have been exploring off the map for a long time. So we're not talking about bringing a whole bunch of attention to these really cool backcountry remote places. But let's face it, places like Red Rock, or the more popular crags, some of the places on the Front Range or the places where we're doing stewardship work, we have to be strategic in those locations because they're going to be popular. The guide services are teaching people to climb there. They're close to urban areas. They're iconic climbing spots where people travel from all over the world to go to, like Indian Creek. So we have to be forward thinking in how we help land managers in these places. And that's going to just make the experience better for everybody. And I think we'll be proud of what kind of legacy we can pass on to the kids that are going to come up and be like, I'm really stoked on going climbing, and they don't want to go out and see some trash place that the generation before them like just overused and used to death. So let's do the hard work and be proud of what we're going to pass on to the kids who are going to go climbing next year.
Yeah. So it's very location dependent. You have those roadside crags that are going to be popular, and they need to have that big belay platform built out. But if you want that alpine adventure and you want to bushwhack for hours, you can still go out and still find that original climbing adventure out there. There's no gear, there's no people, no climb, chalk on the holds, and
taking the gear for a long walk in the woods. I've done that a bunch of times. I don't think that's ever going to go away. There's spots to get away from the crowds, no matter how big the sport gets, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest parts about climbing is that it really is whatever you want to make it. You can find your little niche in it, and it's greater than any individual. It's this big community here. So
yeah, and the community is so amazing, that community aspect, and it'll be a little bit challenging to retain that as climbing grows. It's going to be a little bit tough to make sure that we all still stay connected and feel connected as a community. You don't see the same people at the gym every time you go in like you used to. You don't know everybody at the crag when you go out climbing like you used to. But climbing is still this amazing experience that joins us together. When you travel internationally, you meet people who are climbers. You instantly have a bond with them because you share that experience of climbing and just know what it's about. And that's always going to be there. And that's one of the things that's so cool about climbing.
Yeah. Wherever you go, you can find your tribe, and you have people you can relate to and connect to, and it's a shared language. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll wrap up here. Is there anything else you want to add that you don't think we've covered?
Not really. I just really appreciate Tanaya giving some airtime to these questions of how we really step up and think about the future of climbing and be responsible. There's so many brands that are trying to do the right thing. We super appreciate the support from the industry. And I think it's going to be good for, it's going to be good for the brands. It's going to be good for the guiders and outfitters. It's going to be good for these gateway communities where climbers spend a lot of time. The better we do with this work, the more we're all going to be better off as climbers and as the climbing community in the future. So just really appreciate everybody chipping in a little bit of money, a little bit of time, and be nice to each other out there. I think we're doing a great job, and we just got to keep it up.
Yeah, awesome. And for everyone who's listening still here, stayed with us to the end, go to accessfund.org and sign up to become a member. Come help these guys out. You're out there every day enjoying these areas, and climbing, it's free to one extent, but it's not. There's a cost behind all of this, and we need to support organizations and keep climbing thriving out there. So.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you coming on and speaking with us, and hopefully when things calm down a little bit with the pandemic, we can share a rope one of these days. So.
Yeah, I'd love that, man. I would love to get out with you. Come check out New Mexico. I haven't spent enough time there. And big shout out to you and Tenaya Climbing for having me on. Super appreciate it.
Yep. Yeah, have a good one.
All right, take care.
Yep. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.